Air Canada just made a $3 billion bet on its future, and it chose Europe over America to do it. 8 Airbus A350-1000 wide-body jets with options to double that order, deliveries starting in 2030. At a time when Canada is rethinking every major relationship it has, this is more than a fleet upgrade. This is a strategic signal. If this kind of analysis matters to you, subscribe and hit the like button. Let's break this down. Let's start with what Air Canada is actually buying. The A350-1000 is the largest aircraft in the Airbus A350 family, twin-aisle wide-body, up to 480 passengers, a range of 9,000 nautical miles, enough to fly non-stop from Toronto to Mumbai or from Vancouver to Sydney. It runs on Rolls-Royce Trent XWB-97 engines, burns 25% less fuel than the aircraft it's set to replace, and features the Airbus Airspace cabin, the lowest cabin altitude in the industry at 6,000 feet, meaning less fatigue, less jet lag, and a noticeably more comfortable flight for passengers on the longest routes. 8 aircraft on firm order, 8 more as purchase rights. If all options are exercised, the deal is valued at roughly $3 billion, according to aviation analytics firm Ishka. First delivery, second half of 2030. But the real story isn't the aircraft, it's what it replaces and what it reveals. Air Canada's current long-haul fleet is aging. The Boeing 777-200 LRs average around 18 years old. The 777-300 ERs, about 16. The Airbus A330-300s, nearly 19. These are workhorses that have served the airline well, but they're approaching the end of their economic life. And Air Canada has made no secret of the fact that it needs next-generation replacements. Now, officially, the airline hasn't said the A350-1000 is a direct replacement for any specific type, but the math speaks for itself.
There's no explicit mention that the A350-1000s will be replacing any specific aircraft in the fleet. At the same time, we know that the Airbus widebody slots somewhere between Air Canada's 777-300ERs and 777-200 LRs in terms of capacity and performance. With the airline having 6 777-200 LRs, which may be retired in the next 10 years, the 8 A350-1000s coming from 2030 would be a perfect transition for Air Canada.
6 777-200 LRs facing retirement, 8 A350-1000s arriving from 2030. The transition is not accidental, it's calculated. And here's where this gets interesting, because the industry expected something completely different.
We really weren't sure about Air Canada's desire for Airbus widebodies, especially after its 787-10 order. With the airline's 20 A330-300s somewhat being replaced by the 787s, it really did seem like the airline would be going with an all-Boeing widebody fleet. Operating only Boeing jets as widebodies would have simplified the fleet, paving the way for an eventual 777-9 order.
That was the assumption. Air Canada had ordered 14 Boeing 787-10 Dreamliners. It was replacing its A330-300s with Boeings. The logical next step was the Boeing 777-9. Keep the fleet simple, keep the supply chain unified, and stay in the Boeing ecosystem. Instead, Air Canada chose Airbus. Not by accident, not on impulse. This was a deliberate strategic pivot. And it's impossible to understand this decision without looking at the broader context. Canada and the United States are in the middle of the most strained period in their relationship in modern history. Trump's tariffs, threats of economic annexation, a trade war that has forced Ottawa to rethink decades of continental integration. Canada is actively diversifying its trade partners, its supply chains, its alliances. And now, it's aircraft. Choosing Airbus over Boeing is not just a procurement decision, it's a statement. It tells Washington that Canada is not captive to American industry. It tells Europe that Canada is a willing and serious partner. And it tells the world that Canada's largest airline is positioning itself not as a regional carrier dependent on North American routes, but as a global airline with global ambitions. Look at where Air Canada plans to fly these jets. Not New York, not Los Angeles, the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, Australia. These are the growth markets of the next 2 decades, and they are exactly the markets Canada has been courting as it reduces its dependence on the United States. This is fleet planning as foreign policy. And this order doesn't exist in isolation. Air Canada's total order book now includes 30 Airbus A321XLRs for long-range narrow-body routes, 23 Airbus A220s assembled in Canada in Mirabel, Quebec, 14 Boeing 787-1000 Dreamliners, and now 8 to 16 A350-1000s. The pattern is clear. Airbus is becoming the backbone of Air Canada's future. The A220 handles domestic and short-haul. The A321XLR takes over transatlantic and medium-long-haul. The A350-1000 leads the ultra-long-haul expansion. Boeing retains a role with the 787-10, but it is no longer the default choice. It is one option among several. And there's another layer here that often gets overlooked. The Airbus A220 is assembled in Mirabel, Quebec. Every A220 Air Canada orders supports Canadian jobs, Canadian manufacturing, Canadian aerospace. Deepening the relationship with Airbus isn't just good for the airline, it's good for the country. And in a moment when Canada is looking to strengthen its own industrial base, that matters. In November 2025, Air Canada announced a comprehensive cabin refresh program, new interiors, new technology, new passenger experience across the fleet. The A350-1000 is the flagship of that transformation, the airspace cabin, the lowest noise levels in the sky, a complete reimagining of what long-haul travel on Air Canada looks and feels like. This is not a company reacting to events. This is a company that sees where the world is going and is positioning itself to be there first. Air Canada is not just buying airplanes, it is redefining its identity, moving from a North American carrier to a truly global airline, diversifying its fleet, its routes, and its strategic partnerships, reducing dependence on any single manufacturer, any single market, any single ally. And in doing so, it mirrors the country it represents. Canada is not retreating, it is repositioning, it is not shrinking, it is expanding in new directions with new partners on new terms. Air Canada doesn't just fly the flag, it's flying the strategy. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next one.